Hello, everybody. It's me, Valerie Monroe, and me, Bookwormy. Wait a minute. What is that? That is an amazing Loch Ness Monster bookmark. Where did you get it? I don't know. It came today in the mail and was such a magnificent surprise. But guess what? What? There's no name on it. There was no name on the package. So I don't know who sent this to us, but you know who it looks like, don't you? It looks like Maggie. It does. It looks like Maggie. So whichever one of you readers sent this to us, we really love it. Yes, we do. It's one of the most magnificent bookmarks I've ever seen. And I'm going to use it for holding my place in Journey to Nagwanis. This was a delightful surprise. So we're going to open it to where we were yesterday. We'll just sit her over there by Bookwormy. And if you remember, Brogden is supposed to be out gathering some willow bark to make tea because we're in a new season. It's autumn. And he had just gone over and down this cement wall. He passed some spiders that were kind of practicing their rappelling skills. It was the Web Weavers Club. They were going down the wall. And then he saw this bunch of raspberry bushes and he thought he would go get raspberries for his aunts, except that a dark shadow came over. And I don't think I told you what the shadow was yesterday. The shadow was a bear cub. The youngster sat on its haunches, pulling and ripping at the branches and devouring berries, pawful after furry pawful. Brogden sat motionless and watched. He had never been in any sort of skirmish with a bear and did not intend to start now. The cub continued chewing and chomping, shoveling whatever he yanked into his impatient mouth. And then another bear lumbered out from behind an adjacent bush and joined it. Brogden had not even noticed the second bear. But then he remembered how Aunt Hazel explained that even though some objects are larger, they appear smaller if something else is closer. See, she had said, holding up an acorn in front of his eyes. See how the sun seems small compared to the acorn? Do you see how it hides behind the acorn? That's only because the sun is so far away. And you can try that too. You can go outside with any small object. I have this teeny tiny little thing of Post-it notes. We know the sun is much bigger, right, than the Post-it notes. But if you hold this up outside, you can probably get it to cover the sun completely because this is so much closer to you. Well, that's how it was with the second bear. It seemed smaller when it was behind the bushes, but it grew larger as it lumbered closer. Brogden tried his best to blend in with the wall, and he willed himself to remain still. He held his breath until it felt as if his lungs would burst, and he prayed that that larger bear would not notice him. Luckily, the great beast only appeared interested in the cub, which made Brogden all but certain it was the cub's mother. She made a beeline for it and nuzzled its tummy with her long snout. Very good. Getting fatter, she said, nodding approvingly. Berries, the little cub lisped. Belly berries, Mama. That's right, my dearest, Mama growled. We must put on many pounds before we hibernate. I heard there are some smashed pumpkins in a garden down the road. They do not stand a chance of becoming a pie, so we will head there next. The cub gazed adoringly up at his mother with his jet black eyes. Smashy pumpkins. Belly pumpkins, it said excitedly. Berry juice dribbled down in rivers from his mouth and ran into the fur on his chest. Yes, that's right, my little berry eater. Now off we go. She prodded the cub to his feet with her snout, and they padded off together. Once they were safely out of sight, Brogden rose and stretched. Valuable time had been lost, and now the sun hung high in the sky. The tall grass and weeds parted on either side of him as he strode purposefully in the direction of the willow tree, which was quite young. But even so, its trunk was thick and strong and stood perhaps 40 feet in the air. Its branches fanned out and downward, weeping in all directions. Brogden stood at the base of the trunk and tilted his head to one side, trying to decide on the best way to climb. He noted that Dots and Spots, the two fawns who had been born last spring and who had actually lost all of their white newborn spots, had already helped themselves to some of the bark at the base of the tree. They had been sampling plants throughout the neighborhood all summer, and their teeth marks had left a mottled mosaic in the bark. The bark on the higher branches looked softer, and Brogden could picture Aunt Gladys exclaiming over it as she grated it into tiny tea flecks. He removed a small pair of metal hooks from his pocket. Aunt Hazel had found the hooks during one of her scavenger trips. The house dwellers who had moved into the Brown house after Mackie and Simp's arrest during Brogden's last adventure had all sorts of useful garbage. With a flinging motion, Brogden sunk the left hook into the willow's bark. Remember, he's going to sink it right into this. Pulled himself upward, and at the same time flung the other hook with his right hand and sunk it into the bark above him. Left and right. He's sort of going like this with the hooks, trying to climb up the tree. He hooked and hoisted and pulled, ascending foot and then arm, and then foot and then arm. Between the whirling hooks and scrambling limbs, he looked like a crawling insect. He secured a hook onto the lowest branch with a final flinging whirl and heaved himself onto it. And then he sat there, swinging his legs, holding the basket, and surveying the willow's many branches. The willow's catkins were long gone, having fallen to the ground like hundreds of fuzzy caterpillars in the spring. Thousands of elongated leaves, both green and brown, fluttered above him. If he had not spent so much time waiting for the bears to leave the bush, he would have had to climb to a higher branch. He would have had the time to. However, this one would have to do. The bark looked perfect for tea. By scooting on his bottom, he ventured out further on the branch. When he was about 2 feet from the end, he tested the bark. It was soft enough to scratch a few flecks off. You can see me doing that with his nails. Can you see them dropping? If you can see them dropping. He held them up to his nose, closed his eyes, and inhaled their heady scent. Perfect. And then he felt an uneasiness in the roots of his messy mop of long hair. It quickly spread to the rest of his body, and he had the feeling that someone was watching him. He peered left and right, but he didn't see anyone. Suddenly, a squeaky voice from above startled him so badly he almost tumbled off his perch. Give me a minute. I'm going to grab who this is. This tiny little guy right here to share with you. What there? What ho is what was said, but it actually sounded more like, hey bear, what whoa? Because the plump gray squirrel squatting above him was speaking with a mouthful of nuts. This is a little squirrel. I think it's actually it was a bookmark, and I have it hanging on my light here in my reading room. Brogden noted this, but did not reply because Aunt Gladys had strictly forbidden him from speaking with squirrels. She declared them ruthless, selfish, and gluttonous creatures. There had never been any love lost between Aunt Gladys and the critters who stole whatever enables they could get their furry paws on. The squirrel did not acknowledge the snub, but rather cleared his throat and continued, I said, what ho? Ho there! Ho, ho! Ho, ho! Yoo-hoo! Brogden tried pretending the bothersome imp was not there by counting in his head. When he reached 20, the rodent's volume had increased, which means he's getting louder. By the time he reached 35, the squirrel had hopped down next to him. And at 50, the squirrel was jumping up and down, causing the branch to sway in a somewhat unsettling fashion. 58, 59. I think Brogden thinks if he keeps counting, maybe the squirrel will go away. The bouncing stopped, and the squirrel tried a new, annoying approach to grab Brogden's attention. He poked at Brogden's fingers with his furry paws. Hey, stop it, Brogden said, gripping the branch tighter. He talks, the squirrel said, as he feigned disbelief and twirled his tail in an excited circular motion. Brogden sighed with exasperation. What do you want? I don't have any nuts for you to steal. Don't need them. I have plenty. Been harvesting for weeks. My stores are so full I have some to spare and some to share. Perhaps you need some. No, thank you, replied Brogden. Even if what the squirrel was saying was half true, which he sincerely doubted, his store was probably a collection of stolen property. I'm gathering willow bark, and if you don't mind, I'd prefer to do it on my own. He stared directly into the squirrel's beady eyes. In solitude. Willow bark, you say, the squirrel repeated, ignoring Brogden's obvious request. Quite tasty, although you know that the sweetest bark is not on this branch. Oh, no? Then you must climb higher. Higher is sweeter. Sweeter is higher. The squirrel leaped from branch to branch all around Brogden in a dizzying manner before landing much higher. Up here, so much sweeter. As if to prove his point, the squirrel plucked off a piece and nibbled at it. I'm not going to eat this. I'm just showing you this. Of course, it's probably too high for you to reach. Brogden craned his neck upward. The squirrel was irritating, but what he said about the higher bark was true. And upon deciding that he was not going to be outdone by a rodent, he scooted on his bottom back to the tree's trunk and began ascending, using the hooks once more. By and by, he hauled himself up until he reached the higher branch and found himself nose to nose with the pesky creature. Kindly slide over, Brogden panted. More room, please. The squirrel slid over just far enough for Brogden to squeeze in next to him. It was not a pleasant experience at all. Up close, Brogden could see that the squirrel's whiskers were covered in nut crumbs. When the creature spoke, the mixture of half-chewed nuts spilled out. Ugh. Do you ever have somebody talk to you and their food comes flying at you? Ugh. Not bad, pal, he exclaimed, spraying wet nut crumbs everywhere. Didn't think you gnomes had it in you to climb so well. Let's get things straight, Brogden shot back immediately. First off, I'm not a gnome. I am a foot. We are at least 8 or 9 inches taller than gnomes. And secondly, you and I are not pals. I know for a fact that members of your species have stolen many things from my family over the years. The squirrel looked quite taken aback. Well, am I insulted? Indeed, I am. He huffed and more crumbs flew about. Clearly, you've lumped all squirrels together. I happen to be a highly industrious individual, most self-reliant. And by the way, you might as well know that the bark on this branch is sweeter than the lower, but not as enjoyable as the topmost. Course you'd never be up to another challenge, the squirrel goaded. His eyes twinkled as they locked with Brogden's, and both their gazes held fast, neither one yielding. And that's where we'll stop for today. Let me put this cute little bookmark in here. Put Maggie right in there. Tomorrow, we will see if Brogden takes on that squirrel's challenge to go higher and higher for the sweetest bark to bring back to his aunts. I don't know if it's a good idea for him. I've seen squirrels high up on branches, but I don't know about little boys who are a foot tall. What about bookworms? Can we climb trees? I think you just better stay here inside where you can stay out of trouble. Okay. What do we want to say now? We want to say, come back tomorrow. Come back tomorrow and read some more with us. Bye bye, everybody.